One of the coolest things that NASA ever did was give us the Hubble Space Telescope. I don't think there's anything better. It is showing us how huge the universe is. Absolutely humongous, larger than we could ever imagine. Recently, they just announced that Hubble has found the farthest away galaxy we know of so far. It's so new, they don't have a name for it yet, just a classification. It's galaxy GN-711. And that galaxy is 13.4 billion light years away. We can't talk about it in miles because there's no words for numbers that large. So we have to talk about it in light years, 13.4 billion. So that got me curious, and I researched, well, how far is a light year? How many miles would that be? A light year is 6 trillion miles. So it's 6 trillion times 13.4 billion. Just cannot even imagine that. And it means that the light coming from that galaxy is 13.4 billion years old, because it took that many years to get to us. That light is so ancient, we're not even sure if that galaxy still exists. It might have burned out thousands of years ago, and we're just seeing the light now from long ago. What is so wonderful about what NASA is showing us through the Hubble telescope is that it reminds us that we're part of something larger than ourselves. That's what we get to experience through this. We're part of something so much bigger. So when we think of things that are big in our world, sorry Fusillo, this is way bigger than that. Way bigger. There are very few astronauts who are atheists. And that's very obvious, because what they see prevents them from having doubts. They know that God exists. There's no way that this universe could be this beautiful and this big without God. It is part of our spiritual growth to recognize when we're part of something bigger than ourselves. That's an essential part of being holy. No one can be holy on their own. Holiness requires that you're part of something larger than yourself and that you recognize it. A woman told me a story recently about an experience she had of that. She said that on Holy Thursday she was praying with her Bible and a prayer card fell out of it. And she picked it up to see what it was, and it was one that she hadn't seen in a while. And it had my name on it. It said, "Pray for the seminarians of the Diocese of Albany, 2008-2009. When that card was printed, I had just been accepted as a seminarian. I was still teaching at St. Pius School in Loudonville, and those prayer cards were to remind people that they needed to pray for the seminarians that were coming in. She said that it gave her goosebumps to see my name there. Scott Vanderveer, no father, because I was far away from ordination. She said, I cannot believe that I was praying for you before you ever came here. I can't believe it. But that is one of those holy moments where you recognize the connections that we have, that we're part of something larger. You may not realize this, but if you were a part of this parish, or maybe another parish before 2013, you also are directly responsible for me being here, because you paid for my education. You maybe didn't realize it, but you paid for my seminary training. That's what the Bishop's Appeal does. It pays for the education of future pastors. And I've got some great news for you about vocations. There are a lot more people thinking about religious life than there have been in a long time. In fact, when I was in the program 10 years ago, there were usually about 5 to 10 of us considering religious life at a time. Now, depending on how you count, there's double or triple that. And actually, you've seen posters maybe on the entrances when you came into church. These are the seminarians that are studying to be diocesan priests for our diocese. There's 16 of them. That's so much more than there were when I was here. So help is on the way. But if you are a parent who has ever paid for college tuition, you know that kids are a blessing until the tuition bill is due. We are blessed with a lot of seminarians right now. And that means because we have double to triple what we've had, we have double to triple the cost of their seminary training. Just like students going to college, there's a lot to consider. There's tuition, there's room and board, there's books, there's insurance, there's travel expenses and the incidentals like their phone and things like that. If you think about all those expenses in a year, and then you remember that it takes 4 to 7 years to be ordained, depending on where you come in the process and how much education you bring with you, it means that the average seminarian costs us $750,000 to educate. It takes $750,000 to educate one seminarian. And it's interesting because someone at the last Mass said to me, I thought they paid for it themselves. But think of how sad that would be. That would mean that only the rich would be able to become priests. It's impossible to ask them to pay. It's a requirement of all of us to do our part. A lot of people know that I lived in Boston for 10 years. And I loved living there, but they often ask me questions that make me smile. I get this question all the time. So do you ever think maybe someday you'd like to go back and be a priest in Boston? And I can tell you, no. And that's partially because I like it better here. It's also because it's impossible for me to go be a priest in Boston because that's not my flock. I took a vow of obedience on my ordination day to the Bishop of Albany. At that time it was Howard Hubbard, but he asked for my obedience to him and his successors. So I am part of this flock under this shepherd, now Bishop Ed. And on top of that, it would be terrible manners if I left to go to Boston or Los Angeles or somewhere else, because you paid for my education. You paid for my training. It would be terrible manners for me to just take off and go somewhere else. A lot of people on Saturdays will tell me that they'll head over to the Lee Outlets. It's a pretty nice shopping area over there. And maybe if you've ever done that, maybe you've driven into Lee or to Lenox and maybe caught Mass at one of the churches there. And if you do that, that's fine. But you're not in the flock at that particular liturgy. Those people are, of course, Catholic like we are, but they follow a different bishop. They're part of the Diocese of Springfield, and the Bishop of Springfield is their shepherd. They don't have posters of our seminarians in their churches. They have their own. If you were to go down deeper into the Hudson Valley, and let's say you went to Mass in Saugerties or Kingston, not that far away, you'd hear them pray, we pray for Francis, our Pope, and Timothy, our Bishop. Who's Timothy? Timothy is the Cardinal Dolan of New York City. That's their bishop. He's the bishop of the Archdiocese of New York, and that area comes all the way up toward us. So our area is 14 counties large, and it goes halfway to New York City and halfway to the Canadian border. It goes to the west and touches Deacon Steve's home diocese of Syracuse, and it goes to the east and touches the border of Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And within those 14 counties, that's our flock. And our shepherd is the Bishop of Albany. And right now, we've got 16 seminarians that are the pastors of the future. And it is up to us to educate them. Some people say charity begins at home, you know. And there's some wisdom in that. But that's exactly why we've had this 100th anniversary campaign. Every dollar of that campaign goes for us. It's to replace our floor, our sound system, our boiler, and maybe hopefully someday to put in a new parking lot, to be able to do a lot of accessibility improvements to our bathrooms and our school. We've got lots of goals, but every dollar that we raise there goes to us. When it comes to the bishop's appeal, every single dollar we raise up to our goal goes toward those seminarians and toward those people that the diocese is helping. So it is a reminder to all of us that we're called not only to be part of this community, which is so important to us, but also to be part of something larger than ourselves. You know what I was thinking about recently that kind of gives me chills? The future pastor of St. Patrick's is out there somewhere. Now, if I have anything to say about it, they're not going to be coming here anytime soon. But I'm going to get old, and someday there's going to be another pastor here, and that person is alive right now. I don't know if that person is already thinking about becoming a priest, or maybe it hasn't dawned on them yet. Maybe it's somebody much younger than I am. Maybe it's somebody my age or older. I don't know. But they're out there, and we can pray for them. And we can also support their education to prepare them to lead this community. Realizing you're part of something bigger than yourself is an essential ingredient in spirituality and in the spiritual life. And when we get a glimpse of it, it ought to give us goosebumps.